This is The Common Denominator, and I'm Ilana Rachel Daniel.
הנה, נותבים. יו, מה זה?
אני מפחדת.
זה לא נורמלי.
תראי. מה זה הדבר הזה?
מה זה? לא, זה לא נורמלי.
אמא.
זה מעלינו.
כנסו הביתה.
יש שם ירות כזה.
זה לא ירות, ממי, זה כדורים.
Welcome back to The Common Denominator. I'm Ilana Rachel Daniel. The gunfire you heard just now was no sound for effect, but the recording from one of the dozens of videos taken from my own Negev village in the south of Israel, which began with the start of Ramadan at midnight this Sunday night. Gunfire is heard regularly from the large neighboring Bedouin town on what we are told are occasions of weddings or internal disputes. But in this second incident since the war began, the shooting, both into the air and directed towards our village, came at a veracity and proximity that utterly terrified each resident and their children. Gunfire that several locals commented sounded no different to the raging battles they'd just fought in Gaza. The barrage lasted for 2.5 hours in an uninterrupted stream of rapid machine gun fire that resulted in damage to several cars and homes and scattered many a doorstep with bullet casings that reached far into the center of the village. It is with tremendous gratitude that no one was injured or killed, no less to those taking videos of the blast that could serve as our witness and collective plea to authorities to take immediate action to protect the residents in the area. It took the police, whose station is some 4 minutes down the road, about an hour and a half to arrive. An hour and a half in which, had the attack been of a degree more violent, God forbid, our locals are clear what might have happened in the interim. But arrive they did, and they entered the neighboring town with great show, albeit belatedly. In an earlier incident that evening, when trouble was clearly brewing, the police reported they had even confiscated a single M16 and some ammo, in an irony no one here later found particularly amusing. The offense was felt by the surrounding villages in the area and heard all the way into Beersheba. The extraordinary volume of gunfire, hundreds, perhaps thousands of bullets flying per minute, some from an artillery whose explosions traced their lights across the sky, made clear the scale of ammunition that is on hand in just one town alone. On this night, there was considerable upheaval from the outcome of a second round of elections that concerned the Bedouin communities in the area. Sunday night also began the month-long Muslim holiday Ramadan, and it is at the stroke of midnight the firing began. Ramadan is well known to Israelis from now repeated experience that it brings with it increased violence on our streets. Israelis have been bracing for Ramadan in particular this year under the shadow of war and unrelenting incitement from Hamas. Reports of attempted attacks came immediately. On Sunday, police announced that they had arrested 13 suspects, all Israeli Arabs, on suspicion of planning terror attacks inside Israel, purchasing illegal weapons from the West Bank, and had even received instructions from Hamas on how to make explosives. On Monday night, a strapped and loaded suicide bomber was thwarted by the Shin Bet, caught on his way into Israel. The news announced 2 Israelis stabbed by a terrorist just this morning. Everyone celebrates differently. Each Israeli wonders what terror the month will bring, as clearly plans to lay low near home in some manner of self-imposed lockdown won't suffice as a safety guarantee. What Israelis experience is what we send warning to those in the West. This violence we face is not a localized one. It is of an unhinged nature that is opposed to live and let live, and comes looking for you no matter how you look out for it. The obvious question is, from where is such a formidable arsenal collected? We might piece together the answer as they do ammo. It's from illegal production and exchanges, from smuggling, and even some of it stolen from IDF army bases themselves. Soldiers are forbidden to respond to the thieving, forbidden to even shoot in the air while witnessing an active burglary underway. Here are the results of those efforts. Israel, as a matter of fact, has highly strict gun laws. Qualifications for a gun license must meet specific criteria. One must live or work in an area that has been designated as hazardous. The applicant cannot have a criminal record and requires a declaration of health signed by a doctor, an in-person interview, along with a weapons training and qualification course that consists of a written and practical training. Israelis are permitted only 100 bullets per person with an updated license. They wouldn't have lasted an hour in attack like Sundays had it gone well and truly sour. If a licensed Israeli shoots his weapon even a single time to test the chamber, it must be reported to the authorities, and they face a risk of revocation if the gun is determined to have been fired without permissible cause. In this country, where no one met a single-file line that could hold them back, gun laws are actively and aggressively enforced upon the Israelis who possess them. This stands in stark contrast to our neighbors, who regularly and relentlessly fire into the air in both jubilance and terror. While the world watches the vicious warring Hamas and Hezbollah wage with Israel, all but absent for the telly is the internal violence Israelis engage with daily. Even before the war, and when it's not Ramadan, we live in a Frogger world of what might happen when I drive past this village or walk into that shop. Who and when and where will be next shot down, stabbed, blown to pieces, or rammed into by a car by one of the radicalized millions with whom we live and share our every aspect of lives, services, and space. Perhaps you believe the libel that Israel is an apartheid state, but the last time I spoke with the Arab-Israeli head of the neurology department in Jerusalem's famous Hadassah Hospital, he simply could not concede the defamation. We do not live an if it will happen, but a when. After all, when it comes to terror, it only takes a few to destroy the normality of society. The inversion of evident fact in dialogue surrounding the last 100 years of documented history of the Jews in Israel has reached peak absurdity. Israelis have rarely been permitted to tell our own tale in our own words. So deeply has inherent guilt and bias been built into the conversation, an entirely new language is required to learn our perspective. For never will an accurate conclusion be made about the people who live here until reasonable effort is made to understand them. The pillars of our history that have collectively defined us are robbed from us in broad daylight and copy-pasted onto those whose identity is built on a fundamentally deceptive narrative. The Jews in Israel desire one thing above all, and have shown willingness to make compromise time and again to achieve it. They have been ready to relinquish even that which is not ours alone to give. If only, and ever, we might be left alone, finally and lasting, to get on with our lives, if you don't mind. It is entirely true that Israel, upon which so very much depends, is crumbling under mismanagement. Deliberate or negligent or both is not for this discussion, but its reality would fill many volumes. For decades, impossible to solve problems have been passed on to the next leadership, who cross their fingers and pile on more band-aids and prayers to make it through their incumbency with quiet. They pass the buck until the list of insolvable issues have now spilled out of the theoretical to confront us on the ground. Even now, though it's wholly absent from international discussion, there exists some 500,000 Israelis who have been displaced from their homes along both the southern and northern peripheries for 5 long months, and with no estimate for end in sight. In this country the size of New Jersey, we are herded into ever smaller spaces to face the internal boil of terror being aggressively rustled and riled up. A country fragmented, with enemies surrounding not only its borders, but peppered throughout its heart and arteries in between. Shooting sprees in neighboring villages are a concern for many communities, even in the country's center where it's purported to be wholly civilized. What doesn't make the news could fill volumes, and in fact would reveal the fissures that hasten the critical mass we've reached today. Sunday night are dozens of calls to the police were met with the repeated, "We're on the way." In the absence of police protection, and with shaking hands, residents reached out to a list of reporters in an effort to bring eyes to the acute danger we face. The neighborhood WhatsApp groups filled with the phone numbers of MPs to call even at 1 a.m., even to Itamar Ben-Gvir's private cell phone, who for his part responded to the message. yelling at the top of our lungs to act now before, God forbid, another October 7th occurs. The reality is that as the situation stands, this is no longer a job for the police to face alone. Change will require a far broader range of action. Contrary to the criticisms and strategic misrepresentations of the Zionist movement as anything but the realization of Jewish self-determination, a significant amount, 20% to be exact, of the country is populated with Arab Israelis who in large part have shown solidarity with the state post-October 7th. They are under few illusions regarding the freedoms enjoyed in this land and what quality of life would be like under any neighboring country's authority. There have been several reports of heroic acts Bedouin engaged in on October 7th, and there were those from their community who were killed in the massacre, for they are seen as collaborators with the enemy, and for that deeply despised. All the same, Hamas and the many branches of terrorist organizations like them operate to radicalize Israeli Arab citizens with varying success. Since the war, there have been multiple incidents of Israeli Arabs caught planning strikes on civilians, such as 3 men who were caught in October planning an attack as ISIS operatives. In January, 2 men used a series of stolen cars to run down 17 people in different locations. That included the murder of a 70-year-old woman. These join the increasingly frequent assaults that come from the Arab villages deep inside Judea and Samaria. Though it's been made, along with far too many of the pressing issues of our time, suspiciously taboo to discuss in public, the issue of population dynamics is an entirely real one we at this moment grapple with across the West. In Israel, Jewish Israelis are actually the minority in the Galil with a 53% Arab Israeli populace, although the relationship between northern communities is vastly more agreeable. In the northern half of the Negev, the settlements surrounding Beersheba, which we have described above, Bedouin populace is at 45%. So yes, the birth rate of the Arab community is a sobering factor. The experience of exponential growth is one that is felt initially as a trickle, but before long multiplies to fill a stadium to the brim. Our in-charges may not want to name it, for it is they who are entirely responsible, but immigrant population growth has become observable inside nations west of the Mediterranean. How do open and liberal societies contend with a mentality that operates only as those who conquer or are conquered? With a mushrooming culture that meets all who do not share its precise values with no mere disdain, but active warfare? This reality grabs hold of Israelis today, and Europe and the West tomorrow. The West, more devoted to their ideals than the reality of them, is decaying, and our civilization, whose maintenance was our charge, is winding to a close. The modern state of Israel made a promise to its citizens, in fact to Jews the world over, that it would be here when we needed them most. The devastating realization is, there is no magic that guarantees its success. It is with vigilance, intelligence, and grace of God go we. In its absence, we are as vulnerable to mistakes as are any. Our government has long told Israelis that it could and would protect them from the myriad of enemies who seek to destroy us, and we should in turn put our faith in them. The relationship was once unique. So small is this nation, and so regularly under attack is Israel. State of emergency is our usual motion. We have been taught that in order to live safely, we must follow government guidelines. Prior to the war, I watched closely and criticized aloud the snowballing consolidation of executive powers and ever-invasive technologies that decimate our precious right to privacy. The potential of these technologies to lock citizens into a control grid must not be dismissed, for their potential for misuse is plain, and of a capacity for micromanaged control dictators of the past only dreamed. And we have no few entities vying for control today. So too it must be said in parallel, a hot war brings a cold bucket of water back to reality, and it has highlighted the genius of inventions that, contrary to proving Israel's plan for world domination, are the invention birth of the hair's breadth challenges of saving our Jewish hides day in and day out. The complexity of our world and one another is the truest observation we can offer, and there is no part of it that sits fully in the black or the white. October 7th marked the reframing of this nation's existing reality. That did not come from the savage tearing apart of body and soul alone, or the desecration of life by the desecration of death. The massacre, strategically enacted and GoPro'd in real time, was for the purpose that all Jews would experience the rape of our nation, in the land of our refuge. Our sense of security is shattered wherever we are found, and heightened by the scant displays of good faith, or snapping back into action and swift response on the part of our authorities. On Sunday night, help didn't come to my community for an hour and a half, and the open wound made on October 7th bleeds. The watered-down response by police in the West to the regular and violent violations of the law only underscores the infection and the realization that our safety and security rests on ourselves alone. Outside of politics, outside of chess-playing leaderships and ill-intended actors, there are at this very moment young men and women whom I've never met risking their life and limb for my freedom and my safety. They are of every shape and color, of every political persuasion, and they know well that which does every Jew who does not signal his virtue to the fickle world stage. The threat to the Jews has become genocidal again, and we act on a deeply rooted instinct as a single body in our own defense. For we are never distinguished between when those who plan our destruction come to harm. My gratitude is with them, and my faith is with God. Though many centuries and brilliant careers have been on the case to explain it, hatred for the Jewish people is outside of reason and outside of emotion. It is of a nature that is ancient and will not be going away. We should plan accordingly. The only question of the moment is, how much will the future resemble the past? Though we've not experienced it in this lifetime, it is with surreal familiarity the Jews face this genocidal hate, beyond reason, again. This time, however, after 4 years of relentless fear and panic on the news, and with a cell phone at all times in 8 billion hands, a made-for-you machine with the nuanced ability to manipulate and persuade, diabolical propaganda on every channel has succeeded to delegitimize every cornerstone of Israeli history and Jewish connection to the land of Israel. The dehumanization of the Israeli people, when do you ever hear or see from them in any case, is being accomplished systematically and leads directly to willing our destruction. It's surreal because it's playing out like every textbook and every testimony that has ever been recorded, while we look around to ask, is this really happening? Are we really doing this again? If it is to be, then it happens with all of our eyes wide open. What the world wakes to but has not yet defined is the purpose which Israel serves, in its original concept, if not its imperfect realization. It is buffer between the civilized world and a barbaric totalitarianism that would devour it whole. It is this civilization and its shocking fragility which we come to defend. To think on even its accessories, electricity, clean running water, and the frameworks of law and order and justice. Well, I'm a huge fan, and I suspect you are too. The world swallows whole every sloppily dressed libel of old, and it does not fail to astonish daily. The task feels too great to now define all the pain and beauty and nuance of our story, for how far back we have to go to set the record straight. We can offer no big picture conclusions, for we are in the thick of it now. There is no distance and no hindsight, only what will come today, because we live it all day and wait it out through the night. I have only to offer right now. Now is all I have, and it is, after all, like they say, everything. Now, what I see is the danger of genocide before us. This is what it looks like. It looks like the way very many people are talking out loud right now. The theoretical fear of the Jew, 15 million of us out of 8 billion, for which centuries of vigilance has been maintained, is downright suicidal in light of every observable antisocial result of immigration and radical Islam crowding the tree-lined streets of the West. Jews who do not conquer nor convert, but bring order and morality, balance of power, and increased quality of life, signal when society has reached a critical mass. Every totalitarian undertaking begins first with our mass murder. Be clear with whom and what you stand, for as the saying still applies, first the Saturday people, then the Sunday people. We are the world's forever other, and the lesson has always arrived to us first. So I sound the alarm. Urgent action is needed to protect the civilization the Jews are representative of. There is no one who will take the responsibility if not us. There simply is no one else to fill the task. I was recently asked why. Why do Jews live in Israel where they face a constant threat alleged to be less in other lands? First, because of all the many ways we have been taught by the world that this has never been true. There is no safer elsewhere. For yes, 1,000 times yes, for the self-determination that every people yearns for. But it is for so much more than the world's resounding no with which we have repeatedly met. We are here because in this land our potential is held, because it is raw and alive and now, because of all this nation could be, can only be so rooted in this soil, because the earth itself is sanctified, it's personified, it is base. It is known to me in a place without words. It is home in every definition. We are here because this is the place that gives us life in 4D and not 2, where everything is real and everything has meaning and everything counts. We'll meet you next Wednesday at 6 p.m. Jerusalem time on The Common Denominator.